Hey everybody, Alex here, and welcome to the, wow, why am I so, there we go. Welcome to the month-end recap for April of 2021. My God, this year's flying. And this is also empty. Filmed this one a little bit early in the morning, just because I have time. And I just have nothing to do before work. But it's been busy, to say the least. But I kind of just want to kick right into this month-end recap because a lot of stuff really did happen. Within my personal life, again, the wedding stuff starts to come up. But speaking to gaming specifically, there's been a lot of conversation about preservation, and I think the whole PSN shutting down PS3, PS Vita, and PSP Store really sparked a sensation in a lot of people that, for, I would say, hasn't really been felt. I mean, in the retro scene, yeah. But I think more so those who just look at more of the modern stuff, it kind of just made them go, oh, wait a minute. Like, you mean I can't get this anymore? And preservation is a legitimate thing. We've seen it. Sorry, this is bugging me. Soon. We've seen it in film, specifically, and I know a few of you guys are way more into film than I am, but there are several classic films that we only know about in textbooks. Or back in my day, there were textbooks, but now Wikipedia. Just because all the original masters, all the original, millimeter film has degraded. It's like over 50 years old. It doesn't maintain itself. Or in the case of Disney, they lock it up in a vault and they only re-release it every couple of years when they need money. Or, alternatively, they are products of place and time. And by place and time, I mean certain things are said, certain things are done, certain terminologies are used that just aren't accepted anymore. And because of that, they get locked away. And, they're spoken of in legend. They're spoken of through piracy. And it's a little bit of, I guess you could say, like, it's a give and take. It's like, I'll use the Bad News Bears, the original one with Walter Matthau, not the Billy Bob Thornton version. I had seen the Bad News Bears with Walter Matthau several years ago, when I was a kid, actually. And it was made in a time when certain words and certain stereotypes were acceptable, and there was obviously some racist undertones in that film, and at the time it was quote-unquote accepted. Not so much anymore, and even I was kind of shocked, like, wow, they have kids saying this stuff. Like, it's kind of wacky. And I think it was on Amazon Prime, and I was shocked that it would be on Amazon Prime. But but it made me think about it. By playing it, there is a potential that they may get letters. Not every parent uses the parental settings on these things. Half the time, they're my parents' age. You don't even know what that is. You're just like, here, hold it. Tell me how to use it. So eventually, a film like that may just get lost to the nether, as it were. And we've seen several films, not the Bad News Bears, get lost due to being degraded or just not being re-released. Fatso, to me, is a classic movie with Dom DeLuise. And I saw it on, I think, HBO, like, when I was 12. I'm 37 now. I think the film came out in the 70s. It was with Dom DeLuise and Anne Bancroft, who I think were involved. It's one of those films where it's a comedy, but it's kind of really grounded in itself, and it doesn't hit with everybody. But if you grew up with an Italian family, you laugh at a lot of it. It's that sort of thing. But I remember buying it on DVD at Virgin Megastore way back in the day, which, Virgin used to have physical retail locations, which they called megastores, that had DVDs. They started to recarry vinyl, laser discs at a time, video games, everything. Condoms. Does that get flagged? I'm not sure. Anyway, so I bought it there and it was like $9.99. And I don't have it anymore. Actually, years ago, I had sold it because for whatever reason, there was a resurgence of Dom DeLuise and it was going for like $100 on eBay. Dumped it. And now I think it's stabilized. I think it's like $10, $12 again now. And I was speaking with my fiance about the other day. I was like, I really want to rewatch this. And then, again, that preservation thing came up in my head. I'm like, okay, well, it's not on Blu-ray. To my knowledge, it's never been released on Blu-ray. I've never seen it on any streaming service. So pretty much it's the DVD or nothing, or piracy, right? Now, a lot of people will say the companies owe it to the consumers to give us an option to use these things. I hate to break it to you, the answer is no. They're in it for funds, they're in it for money. If they can find a way to make money off of it, they most certainly will. And some of you may be typing, oh, in that case, why doesn't Sega re-release Panzer Dragoon Saga? They lost the source code. It's gone. They would literally need to spend more money to rebuild this game, which ultimately will just get, oh, well, this isn't the game we had. You know, it was made on Sega Saturn architecture, which doesn't really work to this day. Saturn emulation is still very complicated to do. And if we get a remake, it'll make a ton of money, sure, but their investment, we'll say, is maybe they'll make, we'll say 25% back as opposed to 125% back if they had the source code. Sucks. And it's a real thing. So now here is a game that goes for thousands of dollars, and it even has some form of copy protection on it where you can't use a RAM card because it'll recognize it and it just won't boot. And so meaning you have to either use an OED, an optical disk drive emulator, or you have to basically break the spring in the Saturn, which is what I had to do, where you basically just swap disks back and forth as you play. Damages the laser, you're using burned discs, etc., etc. It works against itself. Your preservation is ultimately killing it. As I've been proven, I've read a few things. I, knock on wood, haven't had any challenges with the laser, but I also have an ODE for this reason at this point. I thought it was worth the investment. Now, this is all on the retro side, disc rot. We've talked about this for years, but when it hits something like PSN, which people know to be an active thing, it scares them, right? And PSN, honestly, at this point, I get it why they want to shut it down. There's no point for them to keep it up. You could argue this is a scare tactic through marketing to get like a burst of dead stock income, let's be honest. But at the same time, PS3s aren't being physically produced. Vitas aren't being physically produced. Let's say on average they make a couple 100,000 in sales a week. How much does it cost them to keep these servers up? Probably more than they actually bring in. So you could argue for these organizations that it just doesn't pay to preserve. But when there's outcry, that's when they backpedal. That's when they go, okay, I guess we'll leave it up for a little bit. And people will say, yeah, we won. Dude, you didn't win, you delayed it. I mean, Atlas was really good with Demon Souls with keeping the servers open as long as they did. I think they eventually had to shut them down after delaying it for like 6 years. Who does that? They had the funds, they saw the outcry. Atlas at the time was smaller. Maybe they didn't have as much a cost. Maybe they were still seeing sales because at that point Demon Souls was the greatest hits. They were acquired by Sega. Sega has a ton of money, and I think Sega eventually just decided to... oh no, Sony has it. So now we have a re-release, so there. We have preservation. People go back and say, well, you know, it's not really the same game and it doesn't have the same magic. It can't. It just can't. And that's where we see, you know, film companies, not film companies, production houses, like we'll say like Criterion Collections, that meticulously go back and try to make these films, quote unquote, feel new. I personally don't collect the Criterion stuff. It's not really my thing, but I am a fan of collecting re-released anime. So, case in point, I got the Venus Wars re-release on Blu-ray. I think it was last month, and I rewatched it. They did a phenomenal job with bringing it up to snuff in terms of animation. They didn't use a cheap AI filter. You could, to an extent, they probably did, but a lot of scenes you could tell it was somebody doing it by hand, which I think is great. However, they're also going off of animation cells, you know, traditional flipping paper. Well, see-through. Some of those film cells you can't do much with, and you can see that in the film. Some scenes look great, wonderful, beautiful, and all of a sudden you get this very weird, grainy, pale image for maybe 2 or 3 scenes. Sometimes the backgrounds look a little off. Sometimes you see a little bit of a waviness. That's because of the time. They were doing this on physical media, which people say, oh no, physical media is the way. Physical media is a way. However, physical media also has a time span, just like digital. I think the rule of thumb is if you have it on your hard drive, you back it up on something, and then you back up the backup, and then you put that in the cloud. Because eventually, one goes down, you have something else, you got to replace it. I forgot who said that. I think it was Jason Heine who did. He was like, basically, you always want to have 3 backups going at any given time because you don't know when one is going to give out. So in the case of the PS3, I think Reggie actually put up a video saying, make sure you back up your hard drive. He's right. Some people, basically like me, swapped in a bigger hard drive 8 years ago and have done nothing with it, and it's sitting there. It's kind of like leaving gas in a car. Eventually it goes bad. Even if you don't use it, maybe if you overuse it, it doesn't matter. There is a lifespan on it. So back it up. People don't seem to realize that. At least I don't think everybody realizes that, because they're more concerned with having access to purchase things so they can download it and say I'm good. Which doesn't make sense. But at the same time, too, the fear is also because you have to talk about licenses. You know, Marvel vs. Capcom, I have both on my PS3, which I think makes my PS3 worth a ton of money because of the licensing. And, you know, I missed out on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I'm still kicking myself about that. I missed out on Afterburner Climax. I'm still kicking myself about that. I missed out on, there was something else I missed out on. The Simpsons arcade game, the X-Men arcade game. Missed out on both of those. So where's the preservation? It's nowhere. It's locked in a vault. I guarantee you it'll come back in a couple of years when Konami, I think it has both, needs money. Especially now with the Switch, they know they just give it to some, we'll say not middleware company, some porting company. Tell them to throw it up there, throw in a couple of screen filters, boom, 20 bucks a hit, everybody will buy it. It's not about preserving the media for them. It's about making money. And if they have no access to it, if they don't have any ability to do it, they have to spend money to make you spend money. What's the easier one to do? Now, that being said, the whole thing does piss me off still. Just because, I've pretty much gotten everything on PS3, PSN I've ever wanted. There's maybe a handful of titles that I would need to get, but I have them on PS2 and PS1, and in some cases I have backups for those too, so it's a moot point. It comes down to a convenience factor. It comes down to using the system so at least we get the gears to continue to run. But it's also not fair to a lot of people who may not know anything, and I'm going to use don't know about particular games, so I'll use an example. Battle Princess Arcadia, which a few of you are probably typing into the search box right now because you've never heard this game before. It's an NIS published game that was released on PS3 digitally only several years ago and physical in Japan. I have never played it. I just know one day it came out, I put it on the wish list, it went on stupid sale, and I bought it, never touched it, it's installed. And they've already said there will be no further sales for these games. So basically, again, the preservation part doesn't really matter. They're saying, listen, if you want to have a copy of this, you got to pay full price. We're not just doing a flash sale, fire sale, hey guys, you got until July. They don't care. They want to make the most they can. If nobody buys it, guess what? They're going to close it anyway. The contract's already been broken. They probably prepaid for a year for this center, and that's it. And it closes. And then nobody has access to this game in English, right? Because it was only released in Japan, and I don't think the Japanese physical version has English on it. So where do you get to play it? You need to get a translation guide. Maybe somebody made one. Maybe you're going to have to go on GameFAQs. Now you also have to remember that your PS3 may die. So you have to consider that as well. And that's the shitty part. The system works against itself, no matter which way you look at it. Even the medium used in classic film worked against itself. And there is a sense of responsibility for us behind it to try to preserve as best we can. An unreleased Castlevania prototype had just come out, technically, I guess, on the Dreamcast. I haven't played it yet. and somebody tried to capitalize on it. And I think ultimately it fell through because there was some legal stuff that they didn't know about. And that's also the problem with preservation of these digital games. There's legal stuff that we just don't know about. You know, on face value, we just say, well, no, they don't care about the consumer. It's like, no, maybe they don't, but at the same time, they got to pay this guy, they got to pay this guy, they got to pay this guy, they got to pay this guy. Oh, and by the way, we have to keep up the server farm. There's a lot of parts to it that we just don't see because we're in a consumer space. And do I say you have to look at it as deeply as I do? No, because again, it still pisses me off because this is what it comes down to. Part of the reason why I decided to reboot, quote unquote, this channel was just so I could have a log for myself. And it's up on the internet and it's backed up on the hard drive and it's backed up on a portable hard drive, and that's where it all is. Now, my old videos, I think I must have done them in like 4K for no reason because they're all like 80 gigs and they don't need to be. So, you know, but I have a backup of them. I can see when I had no gray hair. Well, I had gray hair, but not like this. I can see when I was able to get a haircut and not worry about a virus, too. And I can also see some very strange haircuts, and I can also see how my lighting has, quote-unquote, evolved over time. But, you know, I think this was, like, just a very big conversation this month with a lot of different people in the YouTube space. A lot of get it before it's gone and blah, 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 blah. You know, I'm not here to do that. Doing stuff like that, I don't really think encourages preservation either. It's kind of just saying get it while it's good. I think a bigger conversation needs to be, you know, Sony's been really bad about it, which everybody has said. You know, they've expressed no interest in trying to figure out a way to make the PS3 work on the PS4 or the PS5. They haven't made it really a point to go beyond the existing PS1 and PS2 classics. They did a few with like Parappa the Rappa and whatnot, but ultimately that was the PSP version. And that's just because they don't see the money in it. You know, Microsoft is able to, I would say, be a little bit more flexible because they're embracing this whole, we'll say, Netflix style with their system. And arguably, you know, it makes an Xbox One S very appealing to me just for the sake of just having a cheaper op-res system, let's say, that can play 3 generations of consoles besides its own. And it would just be a Game Pass machine. I don't collect physical discs on the Xbox. I don't see a point. I have Game Pass Ultimate. And I would play them on PC, except I'm in this room so much, staring at this computer and the computer over here. I don't want to sit at it. So let me sit on the couch instead. It's cheap, it's affordable, it's an option. Is it a perfect solution, though? No. Because just like Netflix, eventually the stuff gets taken down. The Office was taken down, and people were heartbroken after having, I think, like 10 years to watch it. And nobody did, because nobody knew there was a time frame. Nobody knew there was a life expectancy. Nobody ever thought it would get taken down and then moved over to another streaming service that they probably just don't want to pay for. So it's a lot to consider. But ultimately, I think, you know, if there are games you're interested in playing, figure out a way to play them. If there are movies that you're interested in watching, figure out a way to watch them. Figure out a way to have access to them, I think. You know, I have The Office on DVD. I'm not buying that overpriced Blu-ray set, but I got that specifically because I love the series and I knew one day it would get taken off of Netflix. And the irony is I finished it maybe 6 months before they took it off. Avatar: The Last Airbender, which I'm watching, and I thought I'd have finished by this, but I don't. Same thing. I decided just to purchase it on Blu-ray along with Legend of Korra just to make sure I always had access to it. But again, is that a perfect solution? No. It's a better, is it a good solution or a permanent solution? No, it's a better solution because the time, the lifespan is technically reset. And don't get me started with remakes and re-releases and all that, because people will say, oh, look, it is a form of preservation. It's a form of reinterpretation. Oh, that's great and wonderful. Trust me, bring out all these classics on as many platforms as possible. But ultimately, I also think it's going to disappoint people because it's not what they grew up with. And I don't know. I could go on for days. I think I've already beaten this topic to death. So let's talk about some games. So I finished Cold Steel 3. And I have to say, watching back on that video and, reading some of the comments, I really do feel like I came off as super duper negative, which I'm not. I really did enjoy the game. And you're right, Fox. It is definitely the biggest script. I just think at one point, I just saw so many parallels that, maybe I improperly drew upon. But again, I'm basing it off of time and place, right? That I don't want to say it left me disappointed. It just kind of left me in such a way where I was just like, okay, I see where this is going. But I'm also beginning to see a formula that Falcom uses for all their RPGs. It's fun, it's cute. I don't think, if I were to say play 1 through 4 in swift succession, I think by the end of it I'd be, just because it's like, the Azure fart. Long time since I've seen it. It's like stuff like that. It's just, you can see it coming. If something was called the Azure fart, that would be pretty interesting. But overall, I really did enjoy my time with it. But it also made me just overly exhausted from reading because, with work being as busy as it is, there's a lot of reading in numbers. And then going from reading in numbers to more reading in numbers was a bit much. So I decided to kick back for the rest of the month and play some other games that were, I guess you could say, a little bit low maintenance. So I start with The Complex, which is another one of these FMV games from Wales Interactive. And this one, they've said it's one of their better ones. Pretty much you play as a scientist with decisions that alter the story, who, in his search to create, I guess you could say, like a miracle drug, somehow unleashes a deadly virus. A little close to home given 2020, but ultimately I think the performances are really good. It's super short though. It's like maybe half an hour. It's very predictable. And I love their stuff for the most part, honestly. This one, you can tell, I think the challenge with these choose your own adventure FMVs is that when you do choose an adventure, it kind of has to load into a different track. So you'll be like, take the blue pill, for example, and then, the character will go, I'll take the blue pill. It kind of breaks the immersion. I wish there was a little bit more of a flow to it, but if you can catch on a sale, definitely go for it. It's like, I think it's like $12.99. It's definitely worth that. Next, I finished Oddworld, Abe's Odyssey, New and Tasty, which is a remake of Oddworld's Abe's Odyssey on the PS1, which I will tell you, a lot of people have either loved this port or remake, or thought it was absolute horseshit compared to the original. Taking the pre-rendered backgrounds out of it, because that is in a field all of its own. Some people said that this just seemed like a very cheap Unity cash grab based on the masterful strokes of the original. The masterful strokes of the original do not have checkpoints, okay? This is a hard as balls puzzle platformer. And it's not hard in the essence where the puzzles are difficult. You just need to be precise. And if you're not precise, you have to reload, you have to replay an area, and there's certain areas where it's momentum based, where you're riding on an elm, which is kind of like, like a Muppet mount thing. And, you basically have to jump from pier to pier to pier. And it plays like Flashback, where when you make a jump, you commit to the jump. There's no turning back, there's no trying to realign yourself in the air like a Super Mario sort of thing. You fuck up, you fuck up. The remake does have checkpoints, which are helpful, but you can also quick save. So I'd say the last chapter or two, a lot of save scumming. And I never beat the original as a kid. I was too dumb to figure it out. And I would arguably say I was too dumb to figure this one out if it weren't for all the save scumming and the checkpoints. But I played it. It was free on PSN a while ago, and it works on PS3, PS4, Vita, and then Switch is the latest. I think maybe it's on iOS. I'm not really sure. I had the Vita version. Eventually bought the Switch version, sold the Vita copy, made money hand over fist, which paid for the Vita copy as well as the rest of the trilogy. And people have said the Switch version is the worst one. I don't get it. It's a PS3 game, so you would think that the Switch could handle PS3 style graphics, all things considered, but in handheld mode, there is a degree of blur, to be completely honest, which left me a little shocked. On the TV, not so much. But I will say a Pro Controller does not fucking work with this game. There is way too much, and I don't want to use drift because that's a trigger term when it comes to Nintendo, but he feels too floaty naturally, and having a Pro Controller gives you more float. So I ended up just changing to the 8-bit Do Pro 2 that they just re-released, and I adjusted the sensitivity down to about 50%. Good to go, no problem. Also, to know, you have to use the analog sticks. The 8-bit Do, you can change it so that you're using the D-pad. Recommend. Now, coming off of that, I realized I had to play a platformer that didn't drive me nuts. So I played New Super Lucky's Tale. I was going to play this on the Switch. And again, the frame rate. This was the port of this game. This game has been re-released like 4 times. It was first it was Lucky's Tale, which was, I think, PC only. Then it was Super Lucky's Tale on the Xbox via Game Pass. Then New Super Lucky's Tale on the Switch. And then eventually that got ported to the PS4 and Xbox, and it's on Game Pass. Started to play on the Switch. It's at home on the Switch as a 3D platformer. But the frame rate and it just wasn't clicking with me. Even on dock TV, didn't matter. So I ended up playing it via Game Pass on my Xbox One S, which it didn't really help with the frame rate, but the fidelity was a lot better, and I felt more in control of my movements as opposed to using the Switch. It's a very, honestly, I think it took me like 6 hours. It's a very competent 3D platformer, but it's very middle of the road. As a palate cleanser, I definitely recommend this game. One of the things I will say about it is, it does do that thing where, it's like, oh, you need 5 MacGuffins to move on to the next boss, and then after that, you need 12 MacGuffins to move on next. They give you a lot of MacGuffin chances. So you could literally walk into a level that will have, like, say, 12 or 13 different boards. You can do 3 of them, and then you can fight the boss. So, I don't know if it was in terms of option or accessibility, but it reached a point where I think toward the water level, I did 2 levels, and I said, I'm fucking done, and I just went right to the end. But the game itself, it's fun. I just don't think it's going to set the world on fire, or it hasn't, but it's been re-released a tons of times, so obviously they're doing something right. But it's cute. I'd recommend it on a sale or via Game Pass, truthfully. From there, I also played and finished Cotton Reboot. This is on the Switch. It's a reboot, or not a reboot. It is a remake of the first Cotton game, and it also gives you access to the PCX98, some such thing version as well. I tried that version. Honestly, I prefer the reboot version. It looks a lot better. It responds a lot better. The music is excellent. They did a really good job on this reboot, and I think they're also doing Cotton 2 and Cotton Boomerang, which is exciting for me because I have Cotton 2 on the Saturn and I've had it for a while. I feel like I'll be more often to try to score attack it, because I did try to score attack this one a bit, which I have not done in a shooter in a very long time. And also Cotton 2 is just overly fucking expensive, and I feel like people should have access to it because these are some very good side-scrolling shooters. And I think Death Smiles is getting its own reboot, remake trilogy too down the road. The only negative thing I will say about this is I think Strictly Limited is doing it, so if you want to get in 2028, good for you. Japanese version has English menus, but it I think right now it goes right, it patches itself to go into Japanese only, which makes no sense. But Lady J made a good point in the previous video where I mentioned it. Maybe once the English version comes out, it'll just repatch itself for English, because that's what happened with 2064 read-only memory. So I'm hoping that's the case, because the in-between cutscenes are pretty funny. I've seen them before and with fan translations, so I think it's kind of cute. But the game itself is really fun. If you're a fan of shooters, you should definitely check it out. It runs very, very well on the Switch, but I only played it on the TV. And then finally, I finished Abzu. This game is... I know this sounds derogatory. It's another one of those hipster independent games. Super relaxing, though. I think this was a good palate cleanser out of all these for me, just because you know, you play as perceivably this robot deep sea diver, and there's some wackiness that goes on. I don't want to spoil it, but the ambience and the music, it's a lot of just synth, and then you also hear ocean sounds, you know, whale calls, dolphin calls, all that stuff. It's very stylistic, so don't go in expecting like a full realistic, you know, deep sea diving simulator. It's very short, it's like 3 hours. What prompted me to play this actually is I heard that Super Rare Games is doing a physical release on the Switch. And this was also free as part of this PlayStation Home, but I had already owned this from a while ago digitally somehow. And there are physical versions on the PS4 as well. I decided, hey, let me just check this out. Like, if it's cool, maybe I'll want a physical copy. After playing this, I do not want a physical copy. The game is good, the game is great, but when you get something like this, and you're gonna spend, after exchange rate and shipping, $50 just for it to sit there, Also, graphically, I don't know if the Switch can handle it. I know it's on the eShop right now, but having finished it, I have no intent to look. I think I'm good with this one playthrough. It does emphasize you to explore, but it also keeps you on rails, because when I say it keeps you on rails, it gives you hints on what to do and where to go. The exploration's all up to you. So if you want to extend your playtime, I would say definitely play through it once or twice, no, over 2 times, just to fully explore every area, because there's a lot of aquatic life in this game that I know I skipped, because I looked at the trophies, I was like, man, I didn't see any of this. But it's fun. If anything, just relaxing. And that pretty much does it for this. I started to play Ghost of Tsushima finally. I gotta say, I wish this was a movie so far. It's pretty cool. I understand the PS5 helps it, but in terms of some of the textures, I'm not so sure, but maybe I'm doing something wrong, I don't know. But I only just started it last time, like an hour in, so I can't really talk about it much further than that. So that does it for this month. Pretty much it, but I'll see y'all in the next one. Take it easy.